Hello, my name is Jason King. I'd like to welcome you to the Irish Famine Migrant Stories in Ontario digital exhibit. We're here today at Curragh Chase Forest Park in County Limerick in Ireland. Today it's a national forest park, but in 1847 it was the ancestral home of the De Vere family. As you look over my shoulder, you see the burned out shell of Curragh Chase Big House, the magnificent aristocratic big house in which the De Vere family lived in the mid-1840s. It unfortunately burned down in the mid-20th century. The De Veres were a wealthy family, but like many families in County Limerick and from all over Ireland, they, and especially their tenants, were very much affected by the impact of the Great Hunger. And in 1847, Stephen De Vere, the second eldest son in the family, took it upon himself to help resettle some of the tenants from his estate in British North America, and in Ontario in particular. Stephen De Vere led a party of emigrants, all volunteers, from here in Curragh Chase, first to London, and then they embarked upon the passenger vessel, the Burman. The Burman crossed the Atlantic in May and June of 1847. The Burman was by no means the worst of the transatlantic passenger vessels, but Stephen De Vere, very unusually, decided not to sail in the cabin of the Burman, but rather in the steerage, the hold of the vessel in which ordinary emigrants travelled. And although it was by no means one of the worst of the passenger vessels, the coffin ships, De Vere was nevertheless appalled by the conditions that he encountered. As the Burman crossed the Atlantic, it arrived at the quarantine station at Grosse Ile on June the 16th, 1847, where De Vere witnessed tremendous suffering on the island. In particular, he witnessed families being separated on Grosse Ile, wives separated from husbands, children from parents, never to see each other again, he writes in his diary. From there, he travelled with his tenants upriver to Montreal, to Kingston, across Lake Ontario, to Toronto, and then De Vere travelled all over Ontario to various parts of the province trying to find a place to re-establish his tenants, to set up a new colony, ultimately opting for London. While he was doing so, he recorded his impressions of the Ontario wilderness, he recorded the sufferings of the Irish famine migrants he encountered, and while he was in Toronto on the 30th of November 1847, he wrote a letter describing the harrowing conditions on the coffin ships to T.F. Eliot, the Assistant Secretary for the Colonies. T.F. Eliot gave that letter to Earl Grey, Secretary for the Colonies, who read it aloud in the House of Lords, and it made a profound impression on British parliamentarians. As a result of De Vere's letter, the Passenger Acts governing the conditions in which emigrants sailed across the Atlantic were changed, and conditions were much improved, making the transatlantic journey much safer. What is much less well known is that Stephen De Vere not only wrote that letter to T.F. Eliot published in the British Parliamentary Papers, but he also recorded in vivid detail his experiences in Ontario, as well as crossing the Atlantic, in his little red leather-bound journal, his little red leather-bound diary, now kept in the manuscripts library at Trinity College Dublin. And it is this leather journal that has been digitized in this exhibit for the first time, page by page, making it publicly accessible. While he was in Ontario, Stephen De Vere was very much impressed by the wilderness which surrounded him, very much in admiration of the splendors of Canadian nature, and in particularly in awe of the varieties of trees that he saw surrounding him. Here in Curragh Chase, in County Limerick, we're in an area of old-growth forest. The estate has its own arboretum, but there were many more variety of trees that De Vere discovered and recorded in loving detail in his journal while he was in Canada. Stephen De Vere was also very much in admiration of the Canadian caregivers of the famine Irish, those who laid down their lives in caring for sick emigrants with typhus, in particular people like the Bishop of Toronto, Michael Power, who died on October 1st, 1847 in Toronto while De Vere was there. He records a very moving private obituary for Bishop Power, and emigration agent Edward Bakkeldare, who died on October 29th, 1847, whom De Vere worked alongside boarding steamers at Reese's Wharf in Toronto in the months preceding it. So we have, in this digital exhibit, the diary of Stephen De Vere, his letter to T.F. Eliot, made available for you to read and enjoy at your leisure.